So today we're going to be reading Jumanji and Making Inferences. You're going to need your journal, the Making Inferences note page, the Jumanji story that is typed out, and the fill-in sheet for making inferences, as well as your language arts journal and a pencil and some glue. If you have not gotten these things, please pause the video, go to the counter and pick up the handouts and get your things ready. When you're all set, start the video again. All right, today we're going to be making inferences. Inferences are simply using something that you've read from the text and information that you already know from the past, or you've done it before, and then you're making an inference with the material. So when you make an inference, you think beyond what the author's words are telling you, not exactly what is said in the text. Go ahead and get this sheet glued into your language arts journal on the next available page. You're going to want to title the page Making Inferences and make sure that you update your table of contents and add your page number. Go ahead and pause the video to do this. When you're ready, start it again. The next thing we're going to do is take the printed out story and glue that into your journal as well. Now, it's a couple of pages that are stapled together, so you can simply fold it in half and glue it down into your journal. You'll want to title that page Jumanji. Go ahead and title it, add your page number, and update your table of contents. Okay. As we read Jumanji, we're going to be filling in this note page together. So go ahead and have it ready, as well as a pencil. So we're going to be reading Jumanji. I know a lot of you have already read this story, but we're going to be using it again to work on several of our lessons throughout this project. So I thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and reread it together. Now remember, Mother said, your father and I are bringing some guests by after the opera, so please keep the house neat. Now, I can go ahead and make an inference about what's going to happen. I know that Mom has said, please keep the house neat, but I know that typically kiddos, don't always necessarily do that when they're left alone. They tend to get out all of their things and make a mess. And you see that happening in that picture there. So keep that in mind as we keep reading. Quite so, added Father, tucking his scarf inside his coat. Mother peered into the hall mirror and carefully pinned her hat in place, then knelt and kissed both children goodbye. When the front door closed, Judy and Peter giggled with delight. They took all the toys out of their toy chest and made a terrible mess. But their laughter slowly turned to silence till finally Peter slouched into a chair. You know what? He said. I'm really bored. Me too, sighed Judy. Why don't we go outside and play? So we can see that my inference came true, my thinking that the kiddos would go ahead and make a mess. And the author goes ahead and tells us that. But we made that inference before we learned that that happened. So we can fill in our note sheet like so. It says from the book, Mom says, please keep the house neat. I know that kids alone will usually make a mess, and moms typically don't ask you to do things like that unless you've already done it before. So I infer that the house will totally get destroyed. And we've already seen a little bit of that with them getting their toys out and making a mess in the room. Go ahead and take a moment and copy this down on your note page. You can pause the video until you're ready to begin again. Peter agreed, so they set off across the street to the park. It was cold for November. The children could see their breath like steam. They rolled in the leaves, and when Judy tried to stuff some leaves down Peter's sweater, he jumped up and ran behind a tree. When his sister caught up with him, she was kneeling at the foot of the tree, looking at a long, thin box. "What's that?" Judy asked. "It's a game," said Peter, handing her the box. "Jumanji," Judy read from the box, "a jungle adventure game." "Look," said Peter, pointing to a note taped to the bottom of the box. In a childlike handwriting were the words, "Free game. Fun for some, but not for all. P.S. Read instructions carefully." "Want to take it home?" Judy asked. "Not really," said Peter. "I'm sure somebody left it here because it's so boring." "Oh, come on," protested Judy. "Let's give it a try." "Race you home." And off she ran with Peter at her heels. At home, the children spread the game out on a card table. It looked very much like the games they had already played. There was a board that unfolded, revealing a path of colored squares. The squares had messages written on them. The path started in the deepest jungle and ended up in Jumanji, a city of golden buildings and towers. Peter began to shake the dice and play with the other pieces that were in the box. "Put those down and listen," said Judy. "I'm going to read the instructions. Jumanji, a young people's jungle adventure, especially designed for the bored and restless. A. Player selects piece and places it in deepest jungle. B. Player rolls dice and moves piece along path through the dangers of the jungle. C. First player to reach Jumanji and yell the city's name aloud is the winner." "Is that all?" asked Peter, sounding disappointed. "No," said Judy, "there's one more thing, and this is in capital letters. D. Very important. Once a game of Jumanji is started, it will not be over until one player reaches the Golden City." "Oh, big deal," said Peter, who gave a bored yawn. "Here," said Judy, handing her brother the dice. "You go first." Peter casually dropped the dice from his hand. "7," said Judy. Peter moved his piece to the seventh square. "Lion attacks. Move back 2 spaces," read Judy. "Gosh, how exciting," said Peter in a very unexcited voice. As he reached for his piece, he looked up at his sister. She had a look of absolute horror on her face. "Peter," she whispered, "turn around very, very slowly." The boy turned around and turned in his chair. He couldn't believe his eyes. Lying on the piano was a lion, staring at Peter and licking his lips. The lion roared so loud it knocked Peter right off his chair. The big cat jumped to the floor. Peter was up on his feet, running through the house with the lion a whisker's length behind him. He ran upstairs and dove under the bed. The lion tried to squeeze under, but got his head stuck. Peter scrambled out, ran from the bedroom, and slammed the door behind him. He stood in the hall with Judy, gasping for breath. "I don't think," said Peter in between gasps of air, "that I want to play this game any more." "But we have to," said Judy, as he helped Peter back downstairs. "I'm sure that's what the instructions mean. That lion won't go away until one of us wins the game." So on this page, I can make another inference.